Hello and welcome to my Baby Steps to the Moon series. This is Jameis Buck, and here we're watching the launch of my Apollo 5-ish rocket. Now, Apollo 5 originally was designed to test the lunar module in space. Apollo 4, as you'll recall, tested the command and service modules. Here we needed to test the lunar module and make sure it was going to function correctly. They were going to test the ascent and descent engines, make sure they functioned correctly, test the separation of those stages, and see how they all behaved in space, because that's hard to do on Earth. So everything seemed to go well. They launched it. It was back in January of '68. It took off fine. Everything looked good right up until they finally tried the first descent burn. And when they did it, a fault. They later discovered it was a fault in the computer, but anyway, the engines cut off after 4 seconds. It's supposed to be a 39-second burn. Much to their dismay, but they were able to salvage a bunch from the launch and managed to fulfill most of their mission objectives, and it was considered a success, even though there was that computer glitch. Now, I'm not going to simulate a computer glitch in mine. The whole purpose of Apollo 5 was to test the LM, right? So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm putting up my lunar module into space, and we're going to see how it behaves in space. We're going to try some maneuvering. We're going to try the stage separation. We're even going to try a fire in the hole abort, just like Apollo 5 did. And that's where they fired the ascent engines at the instant of stage separation, just like they would need to do if they were going to abort a lunar descent mid-descent. And so anyway, we're going to test that, and we'll see how it all works. And hopefully, we will find that my lunar module will be worthy to continue. Let's see where it gets us. So the original Apollo 5, they didn't actually separate from the adapter until about 45 minutes after orbit, but I don't need to wait that long since this is just a game, right? So we're just going to go ahead and separate from the adapter right here. Just like that. That was actually really good. Some of my other tests, I had it blowing off the rockets and throwing the ship into a tumble, but yeah, I could live with that. So good, let's move on. From here, we're just going to test some of the maneuverability. The attitude jets are on the ascent stage, and so they're balanced for the ascent stage, where I think it'll matter most. But that means that maneuvering with the descent stage still attached is going to be a little awkward. It shouldn't matter, but the rockets I'm using, the little engines I'm using, they don't seem to gimbal very much, even though they're supposed to. So I kind of have to depend on the attitude jets to keep us going the right way on the way down to the moon. So we're just going to test here a little bit and see how things work as we're moving around. To give it something to shoot for, I'm just going to set that S4B stage there as our target, and I'm just going to maneuver kind of towards it and see how that works for us. Activating those 8 engines makes a little bit of a noise, but it's ironic because they're tiny engines. I think each one only gives about 5 kilonewtons of thrust, but altogether they pack quite a wallop. So now we're going to throttle things up here and zero our velocity relative to that target we just set up. And now we have some confidence in those descent engines. Alright, so the next thing, let's just flip this around, facing the other way now. We're going to fire up the engines, throttle them all the way up and burn them for a little while, and make sure the ship flies straight, make sure we don't have any odd veering or yawing or anything that might make it difficult to land with precision on the moon. Alright, so here we go. Throttle them up. And it's really ironic how noisy those things are for as small as they are. It's almost kind of comical. But seem to be accelerating well, moving away from that S4B stage, and ship seems to be staying on heading. Have to tap it a little bit, but it seems to be par for the course. Some of these parts don't seem to be very well balanced. But let's just run this for a little while and see how far we get. You can see the rockets, or the engines at least, are laid out in a circular pattern of 8 there. Seems to be a lot better than some other configurations I used, where it was definitely more unbalanced. This seems to do a lot better. So yes, I'm feeling a lot more confident about those descent engines. So I think the next thing to test, we're going to have to test those ascent engines now. So let's get things set up for our fire in the hole abort sequence. We're going to have to turn off the engines for the descent stage so that we can throttle up, and then stage, which will start the ascent engines, and we'll see how that goes. Alright, so we throttle up and we give it all one last visual inspection. Make sure it all looks good. I think it's all stable there. Can't see anything there, so fire in the hole! Oh yeah. Yeah, that worked great. Clean, nothing caught, nothing jammed. There was one version I had where the thrusters were too tight in there and kind of got in the way. Okay, the next test, we're going to point us back at that descent stage, and we're going to try and kill our relative velocity. Maybe get back approach to it, and maybe try some maneuvers right around it, just to test how precise the balance on those thrusters are going to be. Because we're going to have to dock this to the command module eventually. We need to make sure that's going to be feasible. Okay, so we've killed our velocity and then some. We're now heading back towards it at about 20 meters per second. So we're just going to flip it around and get ready to slow down as we approach. Alright, so we fire up our engines again and reduce our relative velocity. We're going to be probably right around 100 meters away by the time we zero this out. Yep, good enough. So now we flip it around and let's maneuver in closer. Alright, now let's equalize velocity and we'll try some more precision maneuvers. The whole idea here again is to make sure that this is capable of docking again. And of course we can't dock with the descent module that is discarded, but we can at least test some precision approaches and so forth. So let's see what this thing can do. Okay, I'm feeling really good about the maneuverability of this craft. I think it's going to cut the mustard. So let's go ahead and separate from this rendezvous and finish out the mission. So with the real Apollo 5, they just let the craft decay, like their orbits decay, because they were low enough that atmospheric drag eventually pulled them down after a couple of days. KSP, no such luck. Once you're above that atmospheric altitude, there is no drag. So we're going to have to help things along a little bit. So I'm just going to burn our ascent engines to lower our periapsis, so we're going to actually re-enter. And but that's essentially how Apollo 5 ended. Both the ascent stage and the descent stage, they both had an uncontrolled re-entry and burned up. But that was planned. It's not like these could actually have ever survived a landing on Earth. They were never intended to, right? So let's say goodbye to Apollo 5, and let's look forward to the next missions. And so it is that Apollo 5 re-enters and burns up, just as the original Apollo 5 ascent stage re-entered on January 24th, 1968. It was destroyed. The descent stage followed a couple weeks later, February 12th or so. But goodbye, Apollo 5. Again, goodbye, Apollo 5. Here's to Apollo 6.